There's no denying that white people in the U.S. have had privileges throughout history that people of color simply haven't. Consider the very first law passed by Congress after ratifying the Constitution, the Naturalization Act of 1790, which said that free white persons and only free white persons could become full citizens of this country. Basically, our very first law as a constitutional republic gave white immigrants privileges that black people and immigrants of color and indigenous Native North Americans weren't given, all of it based purely on skin color. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, this kind of systematic white privilege and race-based favoritism is built into the very foundations of the country.
In 1935, Franklin D. Roosevelt put his signature on the Social Security Act.
Look at all the social programs that pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression and helped create the middle class in this country. Programs like job insurance, which provided cash to people to give them a leg up as they looked for work.
To show how job insurance works, let's introduce Steve, a Louisiana worker who has just lost his job. He goes first to the nearest state employment office to register for a new job. Steve needn't hesitate about going in, because this office was set up just to help people like him.
But while Steve in Louisiana could apply for job insurance, not everyone else could.
Of course, he cannot collect if he belongs to any of the groups of workers that the law does not insure. These are agricultural workers, domestic service in private homes.
Agricultural workers and domestic service workers didn't qualify for assistance, and it turns out this had everything to do with race. These two jobs were overwhelmingly held by black people, and over 80% of all blacks worked in those professions. So the only way FDR could get Southern Democrats to support the Social Security Act was if he agreed to exclude those workers from benefits. This was a conscious attempt by some in Congress to exclude as many blacks as possible, and the net effect of it was to give preferential treatment to whites.
Thousands of people get a big thrill out of looking at model houses, and a much bigger thrill when they buy one.
It was the same story with crucial housing assistance for the American middle class. Loans provided by the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, allowed working-class families for really the first time in American history to own their own homes.
Home ownership is the basis of a happy, contented family life. And now, through the use of a National Housing Act insured mortgage, is brought within the reach of all citizens.
But the way the bill was written, the American dream of home ownership wasn't within the reach of everyone. For the first 30 years of the program, about 98% of the recipients were white. People of color were almost completely barred. Then there was the GI Bill, which provided immense benefits to returning veterans, including low-cost mortgages, loans to start a business, cash payments for tuition, and living expenses. What the GI Bill didn't do is protect black veterans, who qualified for that assistance also from the kinds of legal discrimination rampant in pre-civil rights America. The result was that the vast majority of those who benefited from the GI Bill were white veterans. If a program like the GI Bill ended up disproportionately benefiting people of color, you know what we'd call that? We'd call it welfare. We'd call it a reward, a handout, a gravy train.
The GI Bill of Rights is not a reward, or a handout, or a gravy train.
But that's not the way it was described.
But rather an American way to make it easier for each man to take his place once again in the community and get some of those things for which he went to war.
And I'm not trying to say programs like these are bad. There's no question. They've been instrumental in creating and expanding opportunities for millions of people. The point is that we're being dishonest if we fail to explicitly acknowledge how they almost exclusively benefited white people.
Who is covered by the Social Security Act? People like these.
It needs to be understood that for hundreds of years, government assistance programs pumped literally hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of wealth into the hands of white families before people of color even got to the starting gate. This is what we're talking about when we talk about white privilege, the structural advantages built into our very system that have helped white people, often without us knowing it, while making things more difficult for people of color.